Parker Kent yanked the wrong backpack off the conveyor belt at JFK without a second glance. He was late for a board meeting. The jet was waiting, and his assistant was already blowing up his phone. He didn't realize it wasn't his until he was 30,000 feet above New York City in his private jet, sipping black coffee and unzipping the bag to grab his laptop. Instead of sleek leather and titanium tech, he found a worn denim journal, a cracked phone screen, and a pack of strawberry gum. No laptop, no documents, just whatever this was, what the hell? He muttered, flipping open the journal. A pressed flower fell out. Parker wasn't the kind of man who missed things. He ran a real estate development empire worth over $300 million, had a team of 90 people and a personal driver who never spoke unless spoken to. Mistakes like this didn't happen to him. And yet, here he was, staring at a page filled with loopy handwriting and a sketch of a sunflower with a smiley face in the middle. He was still frowning at the page when his pilot's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Kent, we've received a call from airport security. Someone reported a backpack mix-up. Tell them to send the right one to my Manhattan office," Parker said, though his eyes drifted back to the journal. A note scribbled in the margin caught his attention. "If I don't get this job, I'm screwed. Rent's due Friday. Smile, Zadie." "You've survived worse." Parker blinked. Zadie. He shut the journal and leaned back in his seat, unsettled in a way he hadn't been in years. 24 hours later, Parker stood in the lobby of Kent & Co.'s headquarters, holding the denim backpack in one hand and his own black leather one in the other. He'd told his assistant to leave it to security, but something about that note stuck with him. The handwriting, the flower. The desperate but hopeful tone. It didn't fit in his world of polished suits and bottom lines. Then the elevator door opened and she stepped out. She was short, probably 5'3". Brown curls piled on her head like she hadn't had time to fix them. Her dress was thrift store chic, boots scuffed, cardigan slightly too big. But her eyes, bright hazel with gold flecks, locked straight onto his, and the moment held. "You have my backpack," she said, stopping in front of him, breathless. Parker held it out. "And apparently your entire life." She gave a short laugh, awkward and surprised. "Yeah, I was freaking out. My resume's in there, and my sketches. I had an interview here yesterday, but they moved the time and I missed it because, well, you had my stuff." "You had an interview here?" Parker raised an eyebrow, her cheeks flushed. "For the junior design position. I heard you guys were expanding into boutique hotels." "I wanted to show them my ideas." Parker looked her over again. She didn't fit in his world, but something about her made the air feel different. "Come with me." "What?" "Just for a few minutes," he said, already walking toward the elevator. She hesitated, then followed. Inside the executive suite, she stood awkwardly in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows while he poured water into a glass. "You read it, didn't you?" she asked suddenly. He handed her the glass. "The journal, a page," she groaned. "Figures, the one time I write something dumb." "It wasn't dumb," Parker said. "It was honest." Zadie looked at him, confused. "Why are you being nice to me?" Parker didn't have an answer. He was barely sure himself. All he knew was that this woman, with her sunflower doodles and nervous energy, had unsettled something in him. And Parker Kent didn't get unsettled. He picked up the phone. "Get me HR, I want to discuss the design department." She stared at him. "Are you giving me a job?" "I'm giving you a shot," he said. "Show up tomorrow, 9 a.m., portfolio ready." Zadie blinked. "You don't even know if I'm good." Parker gave a shrug. "You're the only person in the last 5 years who's gotten my attention without even trying. That's worth something." Her eyes met his again, softening. "That's either the most arrogant or most romantic thing I've ever heard." "Maybe both," Parker said. The next morning, she showed up. She was wearing the same boots, a clean blouse, and her curls were down. She looked more confident, but still like herself. By noon, she'd completely frozen in the middle of her presentation. "I'm sorry," she said, biting her lip as her hands trembled. "I thought I was ready." "You are," Parker said calmly, stepping into the room. "Keep going." She did, and when she finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. Parker didn't move. He just watched her, this chaotic, vibrant woman who somehow made his clean, calculated world feel alive. Later, he found her in the break room, staring at the espresso machine like it was a puzzle. "It's touch screen," he said, stepping behind her. "Just tap the coffee icon," she turned. "You don't drink this stuff, do you? I have it installed for appearances." "Right," she said, "because you're the big boss." He leaned against the counter. "You did good today." "Thanks," she said softly. "I really needed this job." He paused. "I didn't hire you because I felt sorry for you. I know." Their eyes met again. The air shifted. "Zadie," he said, voice low. "Yes, I think I want to know what else is in that journal." She gave a slow smile. "Buy me dinner first." He didn't hesitate. 7 o'clock. "I'll send a car." That night, she stood in front of a glass building in Soho, unsure if she was underdressed or just out of place. But when Parker stepped out of the black car in a navy suit that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months and offered her his arm, she felt like she belonged. Inside, the restaurant was candlelit, with soft piano music and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. Parker ordered for them lobster ravioli and truffle gnocchi and let her talk. Zadie told him about her mom, who used to paint sunsets on their garage door, her cat, who hated everyone except her. The way she used to draw on napkins in high school because sketchbooks were too expensive. He listened. When dessert came, he pushed the chocolate mousse toward her. "Still nervous?" "A little," she said honestly. "Don't be," Parker said. "I'm the one who should be nervous." Zadie blinked. "Why?" He looked at her for a moment. "Because I haven't felt like this in a long time." She didn't say anything. Just reached across the table and touched his hand, and for the first time in years, Parker Kent didn't care about deadlines, deals, or shareholder meetings. He just cared about the girl with the sunflower in her journal who'd walked in and turned his world upside down. Zadie hadn't expected the driver to be waiting outside her apartment again the next morning. "I can take the subway," she said, hesitating on the cracked sidewalk. The driver didn't respond, just opened the car door. Inside, the leather interior still smelled faintly like cedar and citrus. She sat down slowly, clutching her portfolio like a shield. When the car pulled away from the curb, she caught her reflection in the tinted window. Her curls were tucked into a braid this time, and she'd worn a navy-wrap dress that made her feel slightly more like someone who belonged in Parker Kent's world. At the office, she didn't see him all day, no texts. No casual drive-bys, no cryptic nods in the hallway. By 3, she was beginning to wonder if dinner had meant more to her than it had to him. Maybe he'd just been charming or bored. But then, as she stepped into the design studio to drop off a revised sketch, she found a note on her desk. No envelope. Just her name in block letters and a silver paperclip. The handwriting was sharp, slanted, and unmistakably his conference room D. 5 o'clock. When she walked in, he was already there, standing at the far end of the long glass table, arms folded. "You're late," he said. "It's 4:58. "I like people who are early," Parker replied, but there was a flicker of something amused in his gaze. She set her sketchbook down. "What's this about?" "I want you to help me with a project," he said, walking toward the window. "We're acquiring a property in Montauk. Boutique hotel, full renovation. I need a concept that doesn't feel like it was ripped from a Scandinavian catalog." Zadie blinked. "You want me to lead it?" "I want you to pitch it," he said. "In 3 days." Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. "Why me?" Parker turned, his expression unreadable. "Because you see things differently, and because I want to know what happens when someone like you stops trying to survive and starts creating without fear." She stared at him. "You don't even know what I'm capable of. Then surprise me." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by old sketchbooks, magazine clippings, and a takeout container of red curry. Her cat, Jasper, curled against her leg with zero regard for the chaos unfolding inches away. She designed until sunrise, when she walked back into Kent & Co. The next morning, she had a vision board tucked under her arm and a digital mock-up on her flash drive. She didn't see Parker again until the elevator opened on the top floor that afternoon. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "You told me to surprise you." His gaze didn't waver. "Then let's see it." The pitch wasn't perfect. Her voice caught once. The lighting was too bright, and she tripped over her own sentence when explaining the reclaimed wood facade. But when she clicked to the final image, a watercolor overlay of the Montauk cliffs with driftwood textures and light-drenched windows, no one in the room moved. Parker leaned forward. "You painted that?" "I did." His jaw tightened slightly. "You'll get your answer tomorrow." She left the room with her heart beating in her throat. The next day, she walked into the studio to find a folder on her chair. Inside was a contract, her name typed in bold. Project lead, Montauk Shoreline. She read it twice before touching the paper like it might vanish. Later that night, after a full day of comments and questions from coworkers who suddenly remembered she existed, she stepped out of the building and found Parker waiting beside a charcoal gray sports car that looked like it had been dropped there by mistake. He opened the passenger door for her without saying a word. They drove north, the city lights fading behind them and the sky turning violet with the last edge of twilight. Somewhere past Bridgeport, she finally spoke. "Why me?" "You already asked me that," Parker said, eyes on the road. "I mean, really, why did you pick me for this?" He was quiet for a beat. "Then, because you make me want to build something that doesn't feel disposable." She turned to him, stunned. "You mean the hotel?" "I mean everything." They arrived at a private estate just as the stars came out. It wasn't a mansion, it was more like a modern cabin perched on a hill, glass walls, cedar beams, the ocean stretching out like a secret behind it. "This is yours?" she asked, stepping out into the cool, salt air. He didn't answer, just unlocked the front door and led her inside. There was no staff. No caterers, just a fire already lit and 2 wine glasses on the counter. "I built this place 7 years ago," he said. "Never brought anyone here." Zadie turned to him. "Why now?" "Because I wanted you to see the kind of thing I used to love creating." Before it all became about numbers, she walked to the window. The waves below were almost black, froth catching the moonlight. "You're not what I expected," she murmured. "Neither are you." She turned around. "I don't know what to do with this." "With what?" "This connection. It's fast. It's messy. It makes no sense." Parker crossed the room, stopping just in front of her. "It doesn't have to make sense." She looked up at him. "You barely know me. I know that you'd rather be honest than impressive. I know that you panic before you speak but still do it anyway. I know that when you look at something broken, your instinct is to fix it." He reached up, brushing her braid over her shoulder. "And I know that being near you feels like I remembered something I forgot a long time ago." Her breath caught. "Zadie," he said, voice low, "tell me if I'm wrong." She didn't answer. Just stepped forward and touched his chest, fingers curling into his shirt like she needed something to hold onto. He bent his head, and when he kissed her, it wasn't cautious. It was the kind of kiss that demanded answers, the kind that made everything else blur, and when they pulled apart, she whispered, "You're not wrong." Neither of them said anything else for a long time. The waves kept rolling in, the fire crackled. And somewhere in the space between fear and surrender, they both knew something had changed. Zadie hadn't expected that after the night at the estate, the kiss, the silence that followed, the way he'd held her hand like he was memorizing it, Parker would vanish. For 2 full days, he didn't appear in the office. No meetings, no late-night emails, no texts. By the 3rd day, she overheard 2 executives whispering in the hallway about an emergency in Milan involving an investor and a hotel deal gone sideways. She tried to act like it didn't matter. But it did. She buried herself in the Montauk project. The design was evolving fast. Her team of 2 junior associates was catching on quickly, and the concept board was beginning to reflect the exact balance of edge and calm she'd imagined. Still, every time she looked at her reclaimed timber sample or adjusted the lighting plan, she could feel the echo of his absence. Late Thursday, she stayed behind to finish a materials board. She was sorting through swatches when the door to the studio opened. "I thought you'd be gone by now," Parker said. She turned, startled. "You've been gone for 3 days. I had to put out a fire, Milan." He closed the door behind him. "I didn't want to leave without telling you, but it happened fast." Zadie returned her focus to the layout. "You don't owe me explanations." Parker stepped closer, his voice low. "I think I do." She didn't look up. "Because of what happened at the house. Because everything feels different now, and I don't want to pretend it doesn't." Zadie finally met his eyes. "Then don't disappear." He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean to. I've spent the last 6 years avoiding anything that made me feel like this. Why? Because the last time I trusted someone, they took half my company and nearly all my sanity. Zadie blinked. You were engaged, married, he corrected. For 13 months, it didn't end quietly. She leaned against the table, folding her arms. That's a hell of a thing to leave out. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't want it to define what this is. Then what is this, Parker? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped to the materials board and touched a strip of sea glass tile she'd pinned at the corner. You chose this one. It reflects light better than the matte finish. Is that the only reason? Zadie hesitated. No, it reminded me of the way the ocean looked from your house. Parker turned to her. That night wasn't an accident, Zadie. She held his gaze. Then stop acting like it was. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides. I don't know how to be careful with you, and I've spent years building walls that don't come down easily. Then don't be careful, she said. Just be honest. I'm not used to this, he said. Letting someone close without calculating the fallout. Zadie reached up, brushing her fingers against his jaw. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to run the numbers first. He stared at her. I want to take you somewhere. Where? You'll need a passport, she blinked. Are you serious? Always. 3 days later, Zadie was standing barefoot on the deck of a yacht off the coast of Santorini. The sun was low, casting gold across the sea. Parker stood beside her in a linen shirt rolled at the sleeves, a bottle of chilled wine in one hand. She glanced at him. Is this normal for you? Not remotely. He poured the wine, handed her a glass. I haven't done anything like this since my father died. Zadie turned to him. He was close to you, Parker nodded slowly. He taught me everything. When he passed, I stopped seeing the value in things that weren't measurable. I forgot what it meant to feel something without attaching a cost to it. She touched the railing. And now I'm standing on a boat I forgot I owned, drinking wine with a woman who terrifies me in the best way possible. Zadie laughed softly. You're not what I expected either. He looked over, eyes serious. What did you expect, a man who wouldn't notice a woman like me? Someone too polished to care about messy things. She took a sip of wine. You've surprised me. Good, he said, because you've wrecked every plan I had. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Parker reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim black box. He opened it without ceremony. Inside was a necklace thin rose gold chain with a tiny sunburst-cut diamond at the center. She stared at it, stunned. I saw it in Milan. It reminded me of the flower you drew in your journal. Zadie swallowed. You remembered that. I remember everything about you. Even the things you don't say. He fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing her collarbone. Zadie whispered, This is too much. No, Parker said. This is exactly enough. Next morning, they docked early and took a car to a villa carved into the cliffside. Zadie stepped out first, shielding her eyes from the bright light. You planned all this in 3 days, she asked. I had help, he admitted, but the view was non-negotiable. She looked out over the caldera, heart thudding. You're really doing this? I told you, he said, standing behind her. I don't want to be careful, not with you. Zadie turned. Then what happens when we go back? Parker's voice was steady. I won't pretend this is temporary if you won't. She hesitated. I've worked too hard to be taken seriously. If people find out, they'll respect you more when they see what you're capable of, and if they don't, I'll make them. That's not how I want to earn respect. Parker stepped closer. Then let me do it differently. Let me prove that I believe in you, not because of me, but because of you. Zadie looked up at him, wind catching her braid. You're not afraid anymore, he said. I'm still terrified, she whispered. But I want to be brave anyway. He kissed her deeper this time, not like a question, but a promise, and when they pulled apart, there was no going back. The Montauk Hotel opened under a sky streaked with peach and lavender, the kind of sunset that looked painted on. Guests arrived in linen suits and sundresses, sipping champagne on the terrace while soft jazz floated from a live trio near the edge of the pool. It had taken 4 months, 4 intense, breathless months to bring Zadie's vision to life. But standing there now, glass of sparkling water in her hand and the necklace Parker had given her resting just below her collarbone, she could hardly believe it was real. The reclaimed driftwood walls caught the last of the sunlight, just like she'd imagined. Lanterns flickered to life along the pathways. Inside, the rooms glowed with soft gold and seafoam palettes, every detail curated to feel intentional and weightless. Her name was printed in the event program beneath the title Lead Concept Designer. She hadn't asked for that. Parker had made sure it happened. "Come with me," he said quietly from beside her, setting his glass down. She followed him through a side entrance, past a velvet rope, into an unfinished gallery space that hadn't made it into the final renovation. The room was dim, the walls bare, but a single spotlight lit a freestanding easel in the center. Zadie stepped forward slowly. On it was a canvas large, wide, and unfamiliar. She stared. It was her sunflower, the one from her journal. But this one was recreated in oil, layers of gold and ochre textured across the canvas, petals exploding outward against a backdrop of stormy gray. The center of the flower was filled with tiny strokes that shimmered in the light gold leaf, catching every angle. She turned to him. "You painted this." "I commissioned it," he said. "From an artist I met years ago in Barcelona. I gave her your journal page." Zadie blinked quickly. "You kept it?" "I had it digitized," Parker said. "I wanted you to see what your chaos looks like when someone else sees it clearly." She stepped closer to the painting, her fingers hovering just shy of the canvas. "It looks unstoppable. That's what you are," her voice dipped. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything yet," he replied, pulling a small leather box from his jacket pocket. Her breath hitched. "I told you I wasn't going to be careful with you," he said, not kneeling, not following a script, just holding the box in both hands like it contained something fragile and sacred. "I meant it." She opened it slowly. Inside was a ring rose gold, just like the necklace, with a single markwise cut diamond surrounded by a thin halo of tiny sunstone gems. Zadie's lips parted, but no sound came out. "I'm not asking you to slow anything down," Parker said. "I'm asking you to build something the same way you built this hotel, messy, fearless, and all in." "You're serious," she whispered. "I've never been more." She stared down at the ring, then back at him, her voice shaking. "I don't need all the answers right now. I'm not asking for all of them," he said. "Just the one that matters." Zadie closed the box gently, then slid it into the inside pocket of his blazer without putting it on. Her eyes didn't leave his. "Yes," she said, "but not because it's perfect. Because it's real." His shoulders eased for the first time in days. "That's exactly why I asked." They stepped back into the crowd together, no announcement, no spotlight. Just Parker's hand resting on the small of her back, and Zadie's fingers wrapped around his like she'd been holding them for years. Later, after the last guest had disappeared into a black car and the jazz trio had packed up their instruments, they stood by the pool, shoes off, ankles in the water. Zadie leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think people will believe the story?" "What story?" "That you picked up the wrong backpack and ended up falling in love with the girl who owned it." Parker turned to her. "They don't have to believe it, we do." She smiled. "I guess it's not the kind of thing you can explain." "No," he said, "but it's exactly the kind of thing I want to live." She shifted slightly to face him, voice quiet. "What happens now, we build the next one," Parker replied. "Another hotel, another painting. Another moment that scares the hell out of us." Zadie traced the edge of the water with her toe. "And what about us?" He kissed her temple. "We keep going, no timelines, no rules, just forward." The lights from the hotel reflected in the pool, tiny orbs flickering like stars. The air smelled like salt and lavender and something new. Zadie didn't need to look back to know the painting was still there in the gallery, framed in light. She didn't need to open the box to remember what it felt like to say yes. The real thing wasn't careful. It wasn't scripted. It was raw and wild and slightly terrifying, and it was hers and his, together. The chill in the October air carried the scent of pine and ocean salt as Zadie stepped onto the balcony of the Montauk Hotel's penthouse suite. Below, the shoreline shimmered beneath the moonlight, waves rolling in steady patterns like a lullaby only the coast could hum. She wrapped Parker's oversized cashmere sweater tighter around her frame, balancing a mug of chamomile tea in one hand while watching the tide. Inside, Parker was on a call with his legal team, finalizing the last phase of a land acquisition in Iceland. He'd asked her opinion on the architecture proposal earlier that day, and when she'd pointed out the environmental risks of geothermal drilling near the resort's property line, he'd paused, then changed the entire pitch. She hadn't expected him to listen, but he always did. The door slid open behind her. "They're filing the adjustment first thing tomorrow," Parker said, setting his phone down on the patio table. "You were right. Again." Zadie looked over her shoulder. "You're not annoyed, only that I didn't think of it first." She laughed, and he leaned against the railing beside her, his hand brushing hers until their fingers laced naturally. "You're quiet tonight," he said. She sipped her tea. "I'm just thinking about change." He studied her face. "Good change or the kind that makes you want to run?" "Both," she admitted. "Everything's moving so fast. We're building something in Iceland. The Montauk Hotel is already booked through spring. My name's in interviews next to yours, and I haven't even had time to process what that means." "You're allowed to take a breath," Parker said. "I know, it's just that for the first time I'm not scared about what's next." He turned to her more fully. "You used to be, all the time," Zadie said. "My whole life was built around trying not to drown. Now it feels like I'm finally swimming." Parker pulled her closer. "You're not just swimming, you're charting the course." She rested her head against his chest. "You still think I'm unstoppable?" "I never stopped thinking that." When they returned to the city the next morning, the penthouse was filled with fresh sunflowers in glass vases. Parker had ordered them before they left. Zadie found a note tucked under one of the stems that simply read, "For your light." She didn't mention it. Just kissed him before she left for her first design panel at the Architectural Institute, where she sat beside 3 industry veterans who all treated her like she belonged. When she spoke about emotional architecture spaces that inspired connection instead of intimidation, people listened. She didn't stumble, she didn't shrink, she owned it. Afterward, as she stepped outside into the brisk air, her phone buzzed. "I want you to meet someone," Parker said when he picked her up in his car. "His name is Samuel Weiss. He's one of the oldest living architects on the East Coast. He's semi-retired, but I've been trying to get him to consult on our Charleston project for months." Zadie tilted her head. "And you want me to talk him into it? I want you to show him why we're different." The meeting happened in an old library turned cafe in the West Village. Samuel was in his 80s, wore suspenders without irony, and had a voice like gravel soaked in bourbon. He listened to Zadie describe her vision of design as an emotional language, and after 15 minutes he leaned back and said, "You remind me of my wife. She made everything feel like poetry." Parker didn't say a word during the meeting, he just watched. And when they left, he opened the car door for her and said nothing until they were halfway down the Henry Hudson Parkway. "I can't believe I almost missed this." She glanced at him. "Missed what? You," he said, eyes still on the road. "All of this. If you hadn't walked into my life with that sunflower and that journal and that impossible smile." She placed her hand on his thigh. "You didn't miss it, you found it." That night, she asked him if he ever thought about where they began. "Every day," he said. "But the best part is where we're going." 3 weeks later, they flew to Vermont under the pretense of touring a potential ski resort site. What Zadie didn't know was that Parker had arranged for a private ceremony in a historic inn tucked into the mountains. She stepped out of the car to find her mother waiting on the steps, a soft smile on her face and a bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. "You didn't think I'd let you do this without me, did you?" her mother said, brushing a tear from her cheek. Zadie couldn't speak. She just hugged her, heart pounding in disbelief. Inside, the inn had been transformed. Candles lined the stone fireplace, and an arch of twisted white branches and soft winter roses framed the front of the room. A minister stood quietly off to the side. No cameras, no press. Just a few close friends, her mother, and Parker in a tailored charcoal suit with no tie, waiting at the end of the aisle. As she stepped forward in a simple ivory dress that swayed with every breath, she felt more grounded than she ever had in her life. Parker's eyes never left hers. When she reached him, he took her hands, and for once, the man who always had the right words hesitated. I thought I'd built everything I ever needed, he said finally. But then you walked in and rewrote every blueprint I had. And I've never been more certain that I was meant to build this life with you. Zadie's voice was clear. You didn't find me by accident. You found me because I was meant to be found. They made their vows with no theatrics, no spectacle, just truth. When he kissed her, everyone clapped, but in that moment, she only heard the sound of his breath syncing with hers. Later, in the quiet of their suite, she stood barefoot on the balcony, Parker's arms around her waist. I don't think I've ever felt this still, she said. That's what home feels like, he said against her skin. She turned toward him. So what now? We wake up tomorrow, Parker said, and start the rest. They did. They opened a Charleston property 6 months later, then a vineyard estate in Sonoma with sustainability at its core. Zadie's designs were featured in 3 architectural magazines, and she turned down an offer to host a television series because she didn't want to give up the work she loved for celebrity. Parker never asked her to. They kept the sunflower painting in their New York loft, right above the piano neither of them played. And every Sunday, they walked 5 blocks to the cafe with the crooked sign and split a cinnamon scone while reading from different sections of the paper. They still argued about tile colors, about where to hang art, about whether or not Parker should stop bringing work calls to dinner. But they always came back to the same place, each other. Nothing about it was careful, and everything about it was exactly enough.